This is Hot Science, a roundup of the week's top news in science, technology, and medicine, presented and discussed by Richard Clarke and the Zoom participants. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke. Let's get on with the review of the program for this week. Uh, the top story is a story about a cardboard car that was invented by Citroën for a world with declining resources. In the technology and EV story, uh, it is Volvo launches three massive new electric truck models for heavy duty use. This represents 2/3 of the company's sales, and this is the first truck line announced that is powered by hydrogen, so its only exhaust is water. And in the environment, a new Stanford study finds that 100% renewables would pay off within 6 years. So the question of cost becomes a much different issue when the payoff is so fast. And in materials, one of the difficult issues in decarbonization is with the iron and steel industry. And this is a report about significant progress that is being made in striving for green steel. And in space and flight, uh, aviation's Alice electric short range passenger plane has had its demonstration flight now for the first time. And in biology, this is a story I think is one of these frame breaking stories that we get often nowadays. And new research finds out that viruses have, quote, eyes and ears, unquote, on us, that viruses interact with the environment and change their behavior depending upon it. And in uh, human stories, I have a couple today. The first is go ahead and ask for help. It makes people happy. And in economics, the story is about China lagging Asian Pacific growth for the first time in decades. So things are changing in China. And my instinct says that this is the beginning of a change in the world's economic order. And in health, two stories. One is that researchers discover a muscle that can promote glucose and fat burning to fuel metabolism for hours, providing benefits that no treatments or other exercises form can benefit. And this can be done while you're sitting at your chair. Americans average 10 hours sitting in a chair a day, and doing this simple exercise can boost your metabolism in many good ways. And then the last story is about an Alzheimer's drug that a study shows it yields positive results. And this is very encouraging. It slows down the onset of Alzheimer's by almost 30%. So that is very hopeful. Now, the first story is about Citron, and it's their cardboard car. And imagine a future world starved of resources where car makers have to resort to things like replacing the metal in your car's roof and hood with cardboard. Well, Citron has done it with their new concept car, Oli. And this is no ordinary cardboard, but a specialized honeycomb material that is reinforced with plastic on each side that is strong enough to be stood on without buckling. And combining this with a vertical windscreen designed to reduce the amount of glass needed and save weight makes this electric Citroen Ole concept car look like a futuristic EV. But they say it's more than a concept car like you're used to seeing. It's almost an expression of a new lifestyle. Let me show you a uh, video of it. So
It skipped a whole bunch.
the Citron.
I'm Ben Mycelis from the Midas Touch Network. The former
Excuse me.
Peter Navarro is set to go to trial for contempt of Congress, 2 criminal counts brought by the Department of Justice. His trial is set for November.
Excuse me. We were interrupted by the story of some other Republican going to trial. That's a good story, but it's not part of our agenda for today. The Citroen Ole weighs under 1 ton and cannot exceed 110 kph, 68 miles an hour. And one of the things they've done is to remove all their wire harnesses from the door panel. These door panels now only have 8 parts instead of an average of 35 in today's cars. The dashboard uses information from your mobile phone, and the windows open manually, and the vertical windscreen cuts the amount of solar heat inside the car and reduces the need for air conditioning. It's also designed to be recyclable and easy to repair so that it can last at least 3 generations or 50 years. That's the opposite of planned obsolescence, I think. And what they say, it's an object that will last and we will be able to repair, bearing in mind that we use resources to manufacture it. We must therefore make it last as long as possible. What an extraordinary idea, I think.
Yeah.
So the world is changing.
So I'm wondering about the safety of impacts, crashes with this cardboard versus
It's on the roof and hood, not on your bumper
not
and
on this.
side panels.
Okay, I was wondering that. So it's
So
just roof and hood.
a
Yeah.
rollover wouldn't be good.
Good point.
Well,
Good.
maybe it's reinforced. The windshield sure looks different, like it
Right,
was so vertical.
right. Also, since it can only go 68 miles an hour, you're going to have to do an outstanding job to roll it over.
True.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'll bet it'll have a very low center of gravity too.
Oh, I think you're right.
All the weight will be low down.
Right. You're exactly correct.
I think it's interesting that Citroën should do this because back in 1950, they introduced the DS model. I don't know whether any of you remember it,
No.
but it was aerodynamically perfect. And there was never any reason to have any other shape in a vehicle. But that is the real problem is people, they see a new shape and they think, I must have one of them. That's the latest.
Uh-huh. Well, it's hard to have a car that's designed to last for 50 years and have the attitude, that's the latest.
Yeah. Yeah, I would buy one, the Citroen shape, the DS, if I could right now.
Uh-huh. So the next story is still more work is being done in the automotive area with EVs. And this is also exciting from Volvo. And imagine a truck that emits only water vapor, produces its own electricity, and has a range of 600 miles. Volvo has made this possible with hydrogen fuel cells, and this summer they've started to test this new line of truck. And the thing about these Volvo heavy duty trucks is they represent 2/3 of the company's business. So what they're making is an enormous bet on the future of hydrogen for these heavy duty trucks. And they say they've been developing this technology now for a number of years, and it feels great to see the first trucks actually running on their test tracks. The combination of battery, electric, and fuel cells will let their customers completely eliminate CO2 exhaust emissions. And the fuel cell electrics have an operational range similar to many diesel trucks, up to 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, and a refueling time of only 15 minutes. Now, hydrogen is a lot more practical for these heavy trucks than they are for passenger vehicles. For passenger vehicles, the system adds too much weight, and hydrogen is not yet available in the refueling stations, and it takes longer to refuel than with gasoline. But for freight vehicles, where they run on schedules and stop at designated facilities, all three of these problems don't matter. They're easily uh, surmounted. And these Volvo trucks could cover about 45% of all goods transported in Europe. European trucking routes are shorter than the US. And so in Europe, the need to have a special refueling station along the way is less than it is in the US. And they say by 2030, they think at least 50% of the trucks they sell will be electric. Here, let me show you a video from them. I have to get these minus 10
November 17th, there have been
out
a
of
number
the
of
way.
very
Here comes the Volvo trucks.
Right now, Volvo Trucks is testing its first ever hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. While battery electric trucks are here to stay, they will not be the only heavy electric trucks on the road, because different transports face different challenges. Fuel cell electric trucks are designed for the most energy demanding assignments. From day to night, they can keep going when there simply isn't time for charging. Perfect for long distances and heavy loads, and in parts of the world where charging possibilities will be limited. To fuel them, you need hydrogen, one of the most abundant resources on Earth. The potential has no limit. The fuel cell on board generates electricity when driving, and the truck only emits water. So, take a closer look at this fuel cell electric truck. It will play an important role in the future of transportation.
Okay, so that is the Volvo hydrogen truck. What do you guys think about that?
Way to go, Volvo.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea.
Mhm. With hydrogen fuel cells, isn't there a danger of them? I mean, we have a lot of trouble with people and propane cylinders for the barbecue. I mean, people are setting fire to the house and, trying to keep cylinders in use longer than they're supposed to and things like that. Isn't hydrogen fuel cells a problem on the same lines?
The thing, I worked in the semiconductor industry for a bunch of years, and driving into and out of the parking lots, I noticed these big tanks and investigated and found that they were used for hydrogen gas. And when I checked out hydrogen gas, I found out it's so much safer than petroleum gas because hydrogen gas is lighter than air. So if it leaks, it goes up. And petroleum gasoline, if it leaks, it goes down. So if there's a fire with petroleum gasoline, it burns up everything. And if there's a fire with hydrogen gas, it burns in the air. So fundamentally, it's safer than petroleum gasoline for fire.
Yeah.
Well, the Hindenburg was full of hydrogen.
That's right. That shows how that goes up. And that's why they use helium for that kind of stuff nowadays.
Correct.
The problem with helium is that since it's an inert gas, then it is not very common. Maybe we can make helium in, isn't that the product of these fusion reactors?
I think it is, yes.
Okay, so we can make helium and have more lighter than aircraft when we have fusion power. Oh boy.
Yeah.
You're muted, Susan.
Apologies. I understood that the world's running out of natural helium,
Yes,
but it's getting harder and harder to find the pockets.
right. And Ukraine, I think, is one of the sources of it. And natural helium is used in the semiconductor industry, and that shortage could have problems in the future with our ability to produce technology until they figure out another way to do it.
To make it. Yeah, that's good.
So now the good thing about hydrogen, of course, is one of the major efforts in solar power is solar electrolysis of water, and that gives pretty much an unlimited source of hydrogen. So the hydrogen in a few years, there's not going to be any availability problems. So good to see you, Chad. And I hope your booster shot was good.
Oh, it was fine. They say keep moving it, keep moving it.
Okay.
I say I'm now double D'd and double B'd.
Okay, good.
2 doses, 2 boosters.
Yes,
Invincible.
yes.
Only thing better is to have COVID.
Well, fortunately, I've had the combination of vaccinations and the disease, so I have broad spectrum immunity. Okay.
Unfortunately, neither vaccines nor the disease prevent you from getting it again.
But it
Well,
helps.
oops.
Oh, yes, for sure, it helps.
Right. Okay, now the environmental story is Stanford research has done by Mark Jacobson has outlined how 145 countries could meet 100% of their usual energy needs with wind, water, solar, and energy storage. That's 145 countries that could be 100% green for energy in 6 years. And as renewables have come to represent a larger portion of the worldwide energy mix, there are plenty of worries over the costs that will radically change our energy systems. And also, of course, the intermittent nature of wind and solar raises concerns about intermittent supplies and blackouts. But this latest energy model from Stanford University shows that in 145 countries, the energy transition to 100% wind, water, solar, and storage would pay for itself within 6 years and ultimately cost less than continuing with the current energy system. Worldwide, this study estimates that it would reduce end use energy by about 50%. I think that's because you're producing the energy there locally instead of shipping it all over the world. Has a big deal amount to do with it, and it takes less energy to get the energy than it takes to drill into the earth and ship it halfway around the world. They also would reduce private energy costs by about 2/3, which is pretty significant, and social energy costs. This is something that some people quibble about. This is private health costs plus climate costs. They say it would reduce these by about 90%, which is very significant. So altogether, this would significantly reduce the cost of the energy system. And they say the other part of it is it creates more jobs than business as usual. As they've dealt with this, the calculations dealt with the uncertainty of the future price of batteries and the role battery will play in the development of newer technologies. And the study concludes, despite these uncertainties, they are certain that the technological barriers don't present a roadblock they say 95% of the technologies needed to implement this plan today are already commercialized. Now, notice they said commercialized, not developed. That means these things are up and running and available now. It's not pie in the sky. And while jobs would be lost in the mining and fossil fuels, 28 million more jobs would be created than lost. And only Russia, Canada, and parts of Africa would be expected to lose jobs, as these areas' economies heavily depend on fossil fuels. They say there still are additional uncertainties, and the greatest is whether significant political will can be obtained to do this transition as fast as the pace is needed. I think finding out that it has a short payoff is one of the things that will encourage the transition. And as you hear about the numbers of the payoff and the new jobs created, I think that makes a powerful, compelling argument. 6 years to pay off for green power is a fast payoff period. And then after that, the cost forever is significantly lower. What a deal.
Yeah.
Are you ready? I know Norm is. He's already doing it.
Mm.
What do you
I'm
think
ready.
about the transition, Norman?
I see a lot of things that are relatively small that can change the situation dramatically in terms of energy consumption and generation.
Mhm.
I think the problem with all these kind of revolutionary changes, although they're desirable, they're going to create winners and losers. And
Of
the
course.
losers fight against it from the beginning. I think politically we have to come up with a system where there will be no losers, or the losers will be compensated.
Well, some could say that with the petroleum industry, they've been compensated by hundreds of billions of dollars that they already have. But the petroleum industry guys will not tell you that. They are afraid of the $100 trillion worth of assets that they still have in the ground, and they want to turn them into money before they become valueless.
Mm.
With any transition, I think that fossil fuels are still going to have importance.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just the volume will go down, and that means the prices will go up.
A completely different question with regard to the study, whether they took into consideration the aridification of the planet and therefore less hydroelectric power.
They said they looked at those kind of issues.
I guess I skimmed that part.
Well, they didn't say it. They pointed to it. Well, they didn't say that specifically.
Mhm.
But hydro has a great potential in terms of energy storage
Right.
by pumping the reservoirs full of water and having them run the turbines in the evenings.
Right. So they make a great battery.
Exactly, with the infrastructure, a lot of it already in place.
Right. Yep.
Which is great if you have the water,
Right.
which we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a quote from a climate change journalist. He said, I might be wrong about this, but I don't remember anybody mentioning that many of the great rivers were going to dry up right now.
Mhm.
And we're talking the Yangtze, the Po, even the Rhine, sections of the Rhine. Lake Ontario here, I mean, it's one of the Great Lakes. We've never, ever had such low water levels. And I mean, in 2017, we had a so-called 50-year flood, and 2 years later, in 2019, the flood was even worse. It was caused by warm weather in the spring. So instead of getting snow, we got rain on top of frozen ground, which then just all,
Right.
dumped into the river systems in the lake. But nobody at our sailing club has ever seen the water this low.
And the problem with the water is with global warming, there's more water. It's just moves
Yes.
different places and changes the time of year when it falls. So,
Well, the air holds more.
right,
So you got more evaporation.
hot air holds more. Yep.
Yeah,
The
until it
Pakistanis
dumps
sure
it.
don't, the Pakistanis sure don't have any absence of water.
Yeah, they just, again, don't have it in the right place. And it's hard to
Well,
move it from Pakistan to the Great Lakes in Canada.
well, that's a combination of picking up more water out of the basin and the monsoons,
Right.
at dumping more water, but also, of course, the glaciers melting.
Right. And poor systems in the country to handle it.
Yeah.
Handle
Well,
it when a
yeah.
30% of your country and your country, the arable land is all along the river systems. When 30% of your country is covered in water, how can anybody handle that? I mean, even if it had happened in North
Right.
America, no way. If it had
Well-
been the Mississippi River Valley.
Yeah. Well,
In
I
the
live
United
in,
States, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers devoted considerable effort to build sufficient dams to minimize the issue.
yeah.
That isn't always done.
And certainly that kind of stuff has not been done in Pakistan because they still are a country that is lacking in wealth.
Well, I live in British Columbia, and all of our electricity in British Columbia is from hydro, everything.
Okay.
So you've got a population of about 5 or 6 million being supplied by a huge area, a huge mountainous area. And there is plenty of potential for kind of more dams and things like that. But I don't know what the numbers would be if you tried to scale it up and supply more people. I think Washington State is the same. Washington State, all their electricity is from hydro.
And certainly in some places like Nepal, Nepal, their biggest export is electricity from the hydro that has been developed over the last 20 years. And so Nepal's greatest export is electricity, hydroelectricity to India.
And the long distance transmission of electricity has gotten a lot more efficient by using very high voltage DC lines.
Right, right.
Rather than the old AC lines and lower voltages.
Right. Okay. The next story is about an area that is the most difficult to decarbonize, and this is the steel and iron production. And steel underpins modern society, and with all of the building that is done and much of the equipment that is used, steel and iron are still integral parts. But its production presently generates intensive CO2 emissions. And so for sustainable development, the steel industry requires technology and product upgrades driven again by innovation and cooperation. We cannot neglect the fact that iron and steel are still the fundamental material for the modern world. And emission cuts in this segment are very much required. The iron and steel sector is the largest industrial emitter, and it accounts for about 11% of the global CO2 emissions. That's an enormous piece from just one industry. And the major steel producing countries and regions now have made commitments to decarbonize their steel industries in line with these climate targets. And China, as the largest producer, has a critical role. And in the current Chinese discussions about the reform of the steelmaking industry for China, it wants to achieve what they call their dual carbon goals for CO2 to peak before 2030 and carbon neutrality before 2060. And so they are looking at policies directed towards energy saving upgrades, pollution treatments, and waste management recycle. But in practical terms, the solution lies in the implementation of low carbon technologies and the product upgrades that this makes possible. These low carbon technologies primarily include the use of renewable energy sources. The carbon comes from all that burning stuff to make steel. And hydrogen can play an important role in this process by leveraging hydrogen both as an effective reduction agent to take the carbon out and as a supply of clean energy. So it's not just going to be Volvo trucks and long range airplanes using hydrogen effectively. It's also going to be the steel industry. It also turns out the recycling of iron and steel is important to close the material loop as long as the quality is high enough to meet demand. And recently, they have developed an electro refining process that directly decarbonizes molten iron to produce ultra low carbon steels and requiring low energy input and no chemical reagent. So it's a much cleaner process. And this process is applicable to molten iron containing any amount of carbon and is scalable and able to be integrated into secondary steel mills fairly quickly. And part of what happens with this upgrading of the steel process to get the carbon out is that it improves their performance and lifetime and reduces the amount of material needed. So making it stronger and last longer also has real benefits. There also are new steel products. They have rare earth steels that where they are able to keep low levels of oxygen in the steel melts and the raw earth materials, and they're able to have real favorable effects on the product. They have a 40-fold increase in tension, compression, fatigue life. That's a factor of 40, and 40% in improvement in rolling fatigue life for applications like cars and vehicles and things like this. And while they're using rare earth materials, they're using it only in parts per million addition. So it's got a very low rare earth content. The other thing that's required in this transition is cooperation with the customers so it meets their needs. And uh, they think also encouraging market development with monitoring and evaluation standards under the guidance of national and global policies can stimulate this innovation and make it happen sooner. And I, for one, am immensely happy to hear about this work because the industrial turning that to be green and renewable is an enormous job. And I think this is about half of the industrial CO2 production in the world. So it's a big, big deal.
Also, a big deal is the increased use of engineered timber, wood,
Oh, yes.
that somewhat mitigates the use of steel.
Right.
And that wood is a renewable resource.
Right. And I think there have been buildings that have been built in the last few years that are multi-story, 10 or 15-story buildings using all specially treated wood instead of steel for the structural members.
Right. Steel is not the only answer.
Right. It's the easy answer. We had to develop the wood products, though.
I built a house with a 40-foot free span using wooden beams that had just a 1/4-inch web between effectively two 2x4s that held the web steady. And that was 50 years ago.
Okay. Well, you are an advanced thinker, we can see.
There is many buildings in Canada that are all wood. Most houses are all wood, you know, kind of the beams, even things like churches and gymnasiums where you need a big span, they use like laminated wood beams.
And again, the people who are making this progress at one level are the unsung heroes, the material scientists.
Mhm.
Okay, the next story is the aviation story. And let me just go to the video about aviation's Alice electric aircraft, passenger aircraft. So uh, the question is, can this sleek T-tail electric twin change the regional airline industry? I think the answer is definitely it can. So this is Aviation Sleek Electric Alice flew for the first time a few days ago. And this aircraft's first flight lasted about 9 minutes. Isn't that longer than Kitty Hawk? And it was unveiled in 2019 in the Paris Air Show. It's a small plane designed to fit 9 passengers, 2 pilots, cruise at a little less than 300 miles an hour with a 500-mile range. And it got the name Alice from Alice in Wonderland back in 2016 when it was being developed. One of the head engineers, while working on the development, kept playing the Jefferson Airplane song White Rabbit while he was playing it, and he started calling the airplane the Project Alice, and the name stuck, which I think certainly is a cute name for a product story for a product name. And there are 3 additional Alice test planes being assembled now, and they've already attracted the first operator, a Spanish regional carrier, Cape Air, has signed an agreement to be the launch customer for Alice. And aviation intends to shake up the turboprop commuter airline market with an airplane that will fly cleaner and smoother than conventional turboprops, and though they didn't say it, much quieter. And the killer is that it's cheaper to operate. And these operating costs are the things that have been driving aviation costs up like crazy. And so the other thing they intend to do, and this is a European specification, is they intend to certify Alice under Part 23 for airworthiness. And this is very stringent. And this will be the first aircraft so certified that is all fly-by-wire. And you do this fly-by-wire where you're controlling it electronically, and this reduces weight significantly. Fly-by-wire is still a tricky technology. When I was running a semiconductor power product line, we were 20 years ago working with companies like Boeing under fly-by-wire. And part of the concern by fly-by-wire is, what do you do if there are things like a power outage and you can't control the airplane anymore? So there are issues involved that they had to solve. And they say the fly-by-wire makes the system a lot more complex, and that takes a lot of time and money to develop and do it right. But they've done it right. And this uses the same kind of lithium ion battery cells that you can find in Teslas and a lot of other cars. And because of their weight restrictions, they use the battery itself as a structural element. And I don't have a clear timeline in the article for when they intend to be in production. They still have, this long process of testing and getting certified at this high level of certification. So I think it'll be a couple of years, but this is I think, the first production designed from the ground up battery powered commercial aircraft. So this is going to be the beginning of a change in the short and medium range aircraft.
The
I believe
problem.
the article said it was going to be in service in 2025. So just
Okay.
a couple of
Okay.
years.
Okay.
But the problem is if there's a lack of pilots, they were
Oh,
in
yes.
the United States are required to fly 2,000 hours. And the way that the cost of that is being reduced is there are in operation hundreds of electric airplanes, trainers,
Right.
small planes that reduce the cost of training the pilots very
Pretty dramatically.
substantially.
Yes. Yes.
And this isn't smoke in the future.
Right.
This
This
is
is
right
now.
now
Right.
that,
With
that
converting.
they're producing electric aircraft to use for training.
Right.
And the operational cost is so much less, and as much as there's very little maintenance and no fuel used.
Right. And I think some are designed where you can swap out the batteries when they come down so you can get them up in the air again right away.
Mesa Airlines, I think, says it's $25 an hour to fly an electric trainer.
Uh-huh.
Now they have on order 100 of them and
Right.
are going into the flight school business. They're already in it, but more aggressively.
Right. It looks like you're going to say something, Susan. Okay. Okay. Now, the next story is a biology story, and I think it is maybe one of the more significant biology stories of the year. And research now suggests that viruses are using information from their environment that determines whether they sit tightly within their hosts and when then to multiply and burst out and kill the host cells. And this work has significant implications for antiviral drug development. A virus's ability to sense its environment, including elements produced by the host, adds a whole nother level of complexity to the virus-host interaction. And right now, viruses are exploiting that ability to their benefit, but in the future, we could exploit it to their detriment. And this new study focuses on bacteriophages, which are viruses that infect bacteria. They're usually called phages. And the phages in this study can only infect their hosts when the bacterial cells have special appendages called pili and flagella that help the bacteria move and mate. And the bacteria produces a protein called CTRA that controls when they generate these appendages. And it turns out many of the phages have an appendage-dependent relationships where they react to the CTRA protein and then can attach to binding sites and then go into action. And these binding sites that they're attacking to are not unique to a single phage or even a single group of phages. They're very widespread. It turns out there are many phages that have CTRA binding sites, but they all have required their host to have these pili or flagella to infect them. And it turns out this ability in viruses to monitor CTRA levels has been invented multiple times through evolution in different phages that infect different bacteria. This is convergent evolution, and it indicates that the trait is definitely useful to these viruses. The first phase in which the research team identified these CTRA binding sites is a particular well-studied group of bacteria called Caudobacterialis. And these are a well-studied group of bacteria because they exist in two forms: a swimmer that swims around freely and a stalked form that attaches to the surface. The swarmers are the ones that have these pili and flagella, and the stalks do not. And because the phages can only infect swarmer cells, it's in their best interest to burst out when there are lots of swarmer cells around. And generally, they live in nutrient-poor environments and are very spread out. But when they find a good packet of microhabit, they become stalk cells and proliferate, producing large densities of swarmers, which are then attacked by these phages. And so they hypothesize that the phages are monitoring in their hosts the CTRA protein levels, which go up and down, and to figure out when the swarmer cell is becoming a stalk cell and is ready to become a factory of swarmers. And at that point, they burst the cell. And part of what is interesting here is everything they know about phages, every single evolutionary strategy they've developed that has been shown to translate to viruses that infect the bacteria. They affect viruses that infect plants and animals as well. And the viruses that affect humans are going to be doing the same stuff. So learning about this at the level of the phages attacking bacteria and learning how to deal with this is, in the end, learning how to deal with viruses that attack human beings. And this new research is the first broad scope demonstration that phages are paying attention to what's going on in the cell. And now that they found out this, the members in his labs have been starting looking for receptors for other bacterial regulatory modules in phages, and they're starting to find them. So the key takeaway from this research is that viruses are using cellular information to make decisions. And if it's happening in bacteria, it's certainly happening in plants and animals like human beings. So if you're developing an antiviral drug and you know the virus is listening in for a particular signal, maybe you can fool the virus. So it's a whole new area of understanding viruses and how viruses interact with their environment. And you know this is going to have profound implications. Clever guys.
And the U.S. government finally is more aggressively moving on viral research.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You know, I would hope so after we've had this period of this last 2 years We've seen that viruses can be a problem, and we don't know very well how to deal with it.
It's not news that viruses are going to be a problem. I mean, there's endemic, or no, sorry, localized mini pandemics every 5 years. I mean, oh gosh.
Mhm.
Who's the Microsoft guy? Sorry, Bill Gates.
Bill
Bill Gates
Gates.
has been saying this for a long time. And a lot of, I mean, people were astonished at how quickly the mRNA viruses were developed, but they were already used for Ebola. It's just that I think most people in North America, oh, well, you know, Ebola, that's over in Africa. It has nothing to do with us. So nobody paid attention to the really key bits of info that were necessary. The mRNA was proposed by a woman in Cleveland, and the encapsulation of mRNA, because it's very labile, it breaks down very quickly, but it's Canadian research that figured out how to encapsulate it in protective lipids.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was used in developing the Ebola vaccine. But again, nobody paid much attention. Oh, well, you know, that
Right,
stuff
right.
over there.
It's happening not here.
That's right, until it did.
Right.
I mean,
But-
there were late night talk shows that were laughing at China
Oh,
with
no.
with recorded announcements telling everybody to stay inside, until suddenly it became our problem as well.
Now, is cancer not a virus, Susan?
Oh, there are many, many different cancers caused by many, many different things. It used to be thought that breast cancer was breast cancer. There's 51 different types of breast cancer.
Wow.
So at its base, like, okay, so you skin your knee, and so you rip off some of the skin cells there, and then the cells know to grow back just the same as skin, that it doesn't grow back as teeth or hair, and it only grows back what you need. So cancer cells are cells that just keep reproducing,
Right.
and cancer cells are in the body all the time, but your immune system says, not you, you're not normal, sorry, get rid of you. So so yes, there are many cancers that are caused by viruses, but there are many cancers that are people who live near freeways and who are breathing in the fine particulate matter, if they have a certain genetic susceptibility, are more likely to come down with lung cancers. I forget the name of the gene, but they're hereditarily predisposed to reacting to the tiny little particles that come off tires, like, and get into the air, and they're breathing them in. So I mean, researchers were confused because you were supposed to get lung cancer if you were a smoker, and then people weren't smokers. And then anyway, so there are many, many different causes, many, many different mechanisms. Cancer is millions of different things.
Okay, let me continue along with a human story.
And
And I'll go
excuse me,
ahead, please.
Sorry, I should have said I'm leaving to get my other glasses lenses. So thank you so much. And
Okay,
hopefully, I'll join you folks next week.
very good. It's good to see you, Susan.
I have to look here. Bye-bye.
So if you need help, go ahead and ask. It makes people happy. This is another Stanford University study, and it says people regularly underestimate others' willingness to help. We shy away from asking for help because we don't want to bother other people. But the opposite is true. People want to make a difference in people's lives, and they feel good, even happy, when they're able to help others. Uh, there are several common reasons why asking for help is hard. One of them is people may fear that asking for help would make them appear incompetent. Children as young as 7 can hold to this belief. There's also a concern about being rejected, which can be painful. Others may be concerned about burdening and inconveniencing others. The thing about all of these concerns is, for the most part, they are exaggerated and mistaken. When people are in need of help, they are often caught up in their own concerns and worries and don't recognize the pro-social motivations of those people around them who are ready to help. We consistently observed in these studies that help seekers underestimate how willing strangers and even friends would be to help them, and how positive helpers would feel afterwards. And they underestimated how inconvenienced helpers, or they overestimated how inconvenienced helpers would feel. When thinking about what motivates other people, we tend to apply a more pessimistic, self-interested view about human nature, especially in Western culture. The Western societies value independence, so asking others to go out of their way is something that may seem wrong or selfish. But most of us are deeply pro-social and want to make a positive difference in people's lives. Dozens of studies have shown that people often feel happier after doing acts of kindness. And many factors can influence how difficult it is to ask for help. In everyday scenarios where the other people are clearly able to help, all you have to do is show up and ask. In some that need more specific skills and resource, you have to be more careful with your request and make it specific, meaningful, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. And if you do this, people will be more likely to help and to feel good after helping. Not all requests, of course, can be specific. When we face mental health challenges, we may have difficulty articulating the help we need. Cultural norms can get in the way, and their suggestion is, instead of promoting self-care and implying that it's people's own responsibility to sort through their own struggle, cultures that emphasize the value of caring for each other and create more open spaces to allow discussions about our challenges and imperfections, those cultures seem to be more healthy. So when you need help, ask for it. You'd be surprised how well it works, and your asking for it is actually a gift to the person that you're asking for help from.
I have some anecdotal evidence for that. There's an app called Nextdoor, and Nextdoor is an app that it's a nationwide kind of a thing, but they sign up neighbors. It's all free, of course. They
Right.
sign up neighbors, and I've noticed in looking at this app, and there's hundreds of people who would be on the same app, thousands on the same app, hundreds in a neighborhood. So it's a neighborhood kind of a thing. Well, they have, all you have to do is say, can you help me with something? And they're overloaded with people wanting to help, whether it's finding their dog, their cat, where's the nearest beauty salon,
Uh-huh.
restaurants, housing, it doesn't matter. Just say, can you help me? The key word is help. You
Does
gotta
it,
say, you gotta say that word.
is it in Lakeside here?
No, this is up here in California, but it's nationwide in the
Okay.
US anyway.
Okay, because it sure
It's-
seems like they would be useful here. We
It-
have to
it
do it by
would.
word of mouth.
It would. It's called Next Door. I'll check it out and see if it might be available.
Oh, if it is, let us know. I will
Okay.
promote the heck out of that because that's exactly the kind of tool we need. Because we do help each other. You know, here we're in a place where that is the desired change that he wanted to see in our culture is here. And
You
we
have
live in it. and that-
you have something similar to Next Door, but not closely similar in Chapala.com chat room.
Right,
But it's not as good as this Next Door just focused on neighbor to neighbor
right,
cooperation.
right. Because it's easier to help if you're close.
Yeah. There's forums for everything on the internet. If I have any problem with my car or with my computer, all you have to do is type the question into Google and
Right.
you will get to the forum and somebody will tell you how to fix it. Yeah.
Right. My son, who is a very high level tech support guy until he became this very high level virtual system guy, said that he often used Google to help with the tech support questions that he got in real time. And using Google helped to raise him from a junior support guy to the most senior support guy in most of the companies he worked for.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, the next story is a story about the changes I think that are starting to happen in Asia. And the COVID zero policies and the housing market crisis have put China's economic growth behind the rest of Asia Pacific for the first time in more than 30 years, since 1990. So this is a big deal. And, I think that it's further exacerbated by the changes that are happening in China in terms of their birth rate going below replacement level. And this China's divergent path puts their GDP growth behind its neighbors again for the first time since 1990. And there are two reasons for it. The first is Chinese strict commitment to its zero COVID policy that is disrupted industry as well as sales and export. The second is China's housing problem and overdevelopment of the property sections. And now in China, nearly a third of all property loans are now classified as bad debt. That's an enormous problem. And in China, their government now is just weeks away from the most important political event that happens twice a decade, which is its party congress. And that's where the political elite are shuffled around in positions in power in their one party state. Jinping is expected to be reappointed for a president breaking third term, and there's no signs of any relaxation of the COVID rules. So this problem that they're having in China is not going away. And what it doesn't talk about is the heavy impact that global warming is going to have on China, with both too much water in some places and not enough water in other places. And it's going to be profound also. So, we're seeing signs now of the influence in Asia moving from China to India. And I think that is a transition that is going to get much stronger in the next few years.
Mhm. There's lots of commentators on the internet about this, about the decline of China and the emergence of India. There's plenty of opinion about it.
Yes. And when I lived in India, 15 years ago, that's one of the things that I was reading in the Indian press, how in the 2020s, the positions of the two countries were going to start changing against each other. And we're actually starting to see pieces of it now, like with Apple moving iPhone production from China into India.
Mhm.
Now, in the health news, I have a good story for all of those like me who are here sitting at your computer, and that is researchers have discovered a muscle that can promote glucose and fat burning for hours after sitting, while sitting. And uh, this research is done by people who had the notion that sitting too much is not the same as exercising too little. And they had a groundbreaking discovery to turn a sedimentary lifespan around. And what they discovered is the soleus muscle in the calf, though it is only 1% of your body weight, can do big things to improve your metabolic health in the rest of your body. And what this researcher is promoting is what he calls the soleus push-up, which effectively elevates the muscle metabolism for hours, even when you are sitting. The soleus is the posterior, the back leg muscle that runs from your knee to your heel. And the soleus push-up has an ability to sustain an elevated oxidative metabolism to reduce the to improve the regulation of blood glucose, and it is more effective than any popular method being touted as a solution, including exercise, weight loss, and intermittent fasting. Oxidative metabolism is the process by which oxygen is used to burn metabolites like blood glucose or fat, but it depends on the immediate energy needs of the muscle when it's working. And they never dreamed that this soleus muscle had this capacity. And the soleus muscle is different than all the other muscles in the body. It has a lower than normal reliance on glycogen, which is this short-term energy. And it lets this muscle work for hours effortlessly without fatiguing, as all the other muscles do that rely on glycogen. And so this soleus muscle is the thing that enables these distant runners to run for 50 or 100 miles without exhausting and collapsing from the leg. And what they found when this soleus push-up was tested is the effects on blood chemistry included a 50% improvement in removing blood glucose sugar and a 60% lower insulin requirement after 3 hours of taking one of these high sugar drinks that they use to test how your insulin system is. It's also effective in doubling the normal rate of fat metabolism in the fasting period between meals and reduces the level of fat in the blood. This is VLDL and triglycerides. And so how do you do a soleus push-up? It's easy. While seated with your feet on the floor, got that, guys? Feet on the floor, and muscle relax. Lift your heel while you keep the front of the foot stays put. And when the heel gets to the top, just relax it for it to come back down. And so do that with one foot and then the other foot, and do it for a while, and your soleus muscle starts to do all this good stuff. And the good stuff that it does lasts for hours in your system. It might look like walking, but it does other things with your muscles. And this other thing that it does is very good for our sitting down bodies. And this is not some new fitness tip or diet of the month. And the discovery could be a solution to a variety of health problems caused by spending too much time sitting in the chair. And over half of the American adults and over 80% of people over 65. Raise your hand if you're one of those. Okay. Over 80%, that means 4 out of 5 of us at least, okay, are living with metabolic problems that are caused by diabetes or pre-diabetes, and this deals with that directly. Having a low metabolic rate while seating is especially troublesome for people who are at high risk for age-related metabolic disease, such as metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. Both of these are things I have, I know, and I'm being treated and cared for pretty well. And one other significant thing about these soleus push-ups is they say we are unaware of any existing or promising pharmaceuticals that come close to raising and sustaining whole body oxidative metabolism at this magnitude. So it doesn't cost anything. It works better than anything else they found. And all you have to do is some of the time when you're sitting, do these soleus push-ups and do them long enough, I think, for a few minutes to get this metabolism working. And if you test your blood sugar every day, you should see results of this pretty quickly. So are you ready for your soleus push-ups? I've been doing them since I read this, and it doesn't hurt. Maybe it'll be better. I'm ready for it to be better. I'm taking, to deal with my own metabolic syndrome stuff, I'm probably taking 5 different medications every day.
It sounds too good to be true, but
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna try.
Right, me too. Me too.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna send it to my siblings.
Yes,
It's
yes,
a good deal.
yes. Now, the last story is an Alzheimer's story, and this is the kind of story that has significance to folk like us. And recent drug results from Eisai Biogen uh, were announced about their new Alzheimer's drug. While they say it slowed progress by 27% compared with a placebo, the director of Mayo Clinic's Alzheimer's Disease Research Center says it's not a huge effect, but it is a positive effect. And he didn't say a positive effect where other medications have failed. And the race to stem the progression of Alzheimer's comes in America, where the number of people who are going to be affected, they say, is going to double in the next 20 or 30 years. So if you reduce it by 30%, that's a pretty significant thing. And people with early Alzheimer's can use the treatment to delay advance of the debilitating disease. So it's a win for Alzheimer's patient. This drug, lecanemab, I'm sure I pronounced it wrong, is similar to a previous drug, Aduhelm, which is an intravenous antibody, and the first drug is designed to remove amyloid deposits. This new drug targets forms of amyloid that have not yet clumped together. So the reason why it delays the onset is that it gets it before they clump together. And if you can slow this disease by 30%, it's fantastic, as you may have seen with people you know who have come down with Alzheimer's. Slowing it is really a blessing. And it's still in the very early days. Alzheimer's is a complex disease, and amyloid related pathology is unlikely to be the only factor. And the prior drug, Aduhelm, was the first new Alzheimer's drug approved in 20 years after a list of high profile failures. Now, one of the problems here is the first drug was first priced at $56,000 a year and then cut in half to $28,000 a year. That's a little pricey for most people. Medicare has said they would only pay for the original drug and similar drugs if patients were enrolled in a valid clinical study, which sharply curtailed Medicare's payment for the drug. But so they haven't announced a price for the new drug. I bet it's still real pricey, and that puts it out of the range for many people who would benefit from it. But hope is on the horizon, and it's hope in an area that many people have felt hopeless about.
Mhm.
Certainly good news. The
Yep.
best news for a number of years, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's better news than the first drug that was released because it slows the progression down significantly. And that means it gives people more years of their life back, which is a
Seems like
big,
FDA got in some little bit of trouble over the previous drug. And
right.
they're hoping that this one will kind of get them back out of that.
Right, because the first drug, they approved it because they could see the reduction in the amyloid proteins, but they
Right.
couldn't establish that that actually did anybody any good.
Right.
And this they've established does people good. Now that means that the demand for it will actually be a lot higher, and you would think with higher demand, the cost would go down. I would hope. I'm ready for it to be $20 a pill. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today, and adios, and we'll see you next week. It was another good session, and I appreciate your participation.
Thank you, Richard.
Adios. Adios, muchachos.